here with Gabriel Omat, better known as G. Awesome nickname. I love that, G. So you're the founder of Energetic Alignment Academy and AI Coachbox. I met you through one of the workshops online you ran, which, forgive me for this explanation, but it was a sales workshop, but online sales. But you had this very interesting emphasis on the spiritual aspects of sales, aligning yourself with the customer and really seeing sales as service, which is beautiful. I believe that as well. What stood out to me the most about you, which makes me call you to mind even now, I think it's been years now, is your deep authenticity. How do you do that?
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me and reaching out after all that time. It was so good to hear from you. And for me, I don't know. I think it really, for myself, it comes natural. Like I have a hard time being inauthentic, probably to a detriment, maybe at some times, especially in my line of work, some might say. And that's really something that I had a lot of trouble with, really reconciling. How do I make sales in the world? How do I build a business? How do I market myself? And how do I do all those things without losing my own authenticity? And what I found out was when I first started, I wasn't very authentic. I really tried to mimic my own mentor because she was very successful and I thought I had to be like her and show up like her. And I struggled. And it wasn't until I realized that it was my authenticity that people actually resonated with. And when you can do that, you don't really need to sell people on anything. They want to be in your space and they want to be around you. And if they don't, that's okay too, because you're never going to please all the people. Nobody's, I should say not nobody, but you're never going to please all the people. Not everybody's going to want to work with you. But the few select that do, if you could show up really authentically, and that means you might freeze when you're speaking online. I've done that before. I kind of just did it. I just lost my train of thought for a second. And you just be yourself and keep going. And it's sort of like, oh, wow, people don't mind that because guess what? They're human too. And so for me, I really value authenticity in other people. And I just love to have genuine conversations. And so it comes pretty natural for me to be authentic.
I love it. That's the trait I admire most in my best friend. And it's something that we've talked about. And I think it was different when you're talking to strangers. And in my experience, the biggest obstacle to that is fear. So what would you say to people who, hey, do I really reveal my authentic self? What if it'll go badly? What if people think badly about me?
Well, I think I've done a lot of work on that in the past and just doing a lot of personal development myself. But when you really think about it, whose opinion matters more? People that aren't you, people that passing through on the internet, people that are just voicing their thoughts out loud, or your own opinion of yourself. And when you surround yourself with authentic people that get you, you have true, genuine friendships. And I think in that case, it really in relationships. And I think that makes it a little bit easier to ignore the noise out there of people who, might have bad things to say about you or whatever. I mean, looking at online these days and the way that people can just say really nasty things and then leave. And it's just really easy for people to do. And so to me, I really don't let it bother me anymore because I just know that's the human race. That's how we are, especially in this online world. And I just don't waste a lot of my energy thinking about it.
I'm just going to comment on my experience as you were saying that. I just felt my shoulders get light and just like a warmth pervade me. So
beautiful.
That's what makes you memorable. And again, I'm not exactly sure how you do that. In my experience, I'm trying to think if this is completely accurate. As far as I can recall, that only happens to me in religious experiences when people are speaking about God or Christianity. I don't know if that has something to do with your approach, but whatever you're doing is working, and I hope to be able to incorporate that.
Well, that's beautiful to hear. I love to hear that. Thank you. And I'm so glad that you feel that because I think there's definitely a spiritual aspect to that. I am all about bridging. I feel like I'm kind of like part of my mission is to guide people in bridging really what might seemingly be like opposite sides. So for example, technology and humanity. That's kind of like bridging that, we can actually bridge those two things. It might be inauthenticity, authenticity, efficiency, and authenticity. It might be different spiritual beliefs, like things like spirituality to me is everything. Like we are all spiritual human beings. Some of us might not realize it, but when you feel that connection to the divine, whatever that is for you, I think that you just show up with a different energy because you just exude love, I feel like. And the more we can connect with ourselves in that way, which is a really important part of my business and kind of why we designed Energetic Alignment Academy like we did, is when I was trying to build a business as a life coach first, I felt I learned all of those masculine energy traits to build a business, all of the marketing, all of the funnels, all of the do. I was still working full time as a corporate sales rep, had a family. So I was very busy and in my masculine energy. And I had sort of lost touch with my own spiritual practice, my own work on myself. And I think that's why I struggled, because once I decided to prioritize that is when things started really taking off in my business. And so that's when we designed Energetic Alignment Academy to remind ourselves that there's feminine and the masculine energies, and we all have them. It doesn't really matter about our gender. And when we can harmonize those and leave space for both, we can really excel, I think, in all areas of our life and just live a more joyous life.
For fans of Ian McGilchrist and neuroscience, I think what you're describing as masculine energy comes from the left hemisphere of the brain, putting projects over people, whereas the right hemisphere is where meaning comes from, putting people over projects and so on. I want to get into your AI expertise. You studied this quite a bit. I personally think that the impact of AI is greatly underestimated. I think it's the greatest invention since the internet, and possibly even more revolutionary than the internet. Kind of want to just ask you, where do you think this is going, and why do you see that it's so important that you basically had a career change focusing on AI?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of people do underestimate the impact of what our future is going to look like. And I don't think anybody knows, including the people that are working on it right now and developing it at such a high rate of speed. There's a lot of ideas of where the future could go. But if we think about where AI started just in 2021, or maybe beginning in 2022 when ChatGPT first came out. And then this is when everyone got to experience, anyone, me, not a coder, no experience in that kind of thing at all. Any of us could have access to this new amazing technology. And people really don't understand how those LLMs work, the large language models, for the most part, unless you've studied this. But it's a prediction model. It's what it is. When you realize what this thing can do and you learn how to use it in a way that is not, it's far less generic than just, asking ChatGPT a question and getting an answer. When you really learn to train these models on your data, your personality, your things, as you know, it's incredible what you can do with them. But what's happening right now is it's growing at such an exponential rate. It's surprising the people that are building these things, the people at Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, and more. It's expanded all over. But the next phase is the AGI, which it might change its name, but basically general intelligence, like artificial general intelligence, meaning it's like an agent. So what we have now, there's still very much human involvement in that. So we can get a lot of information from AI and we can use it to help with our own creativity, push our limits. I use mine as a study guide often. So I'm studying change management right now because I feel like that is going to be needed in the workplace, as it's so much more than here's a new tool to use. This is changing the way we work in general, just like the internet did, like you were saying. And so once we have these agents, what they can do is, and what they're working on right now, we're not really there yet. People talk about it, but really when they're saying there's an agent that does this, that, or the other thing, it's really more of workflows in the background that are connecting different apps to do different things based on automations, right? But in the future, we're not even going to have to build automations anymore. So I went down the rabbit hole of building those automations for a hot minute. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go all the way down this rabbit hole, because I bet within 2 years, nobody's going to need to know how to do that, because we can just simply ask AI to do the whole thing for us and it's done. So when I think about the future, and this is what fascinates me about it, so much more than just being efficient in your work and productive, it's like, what does this mean for humanity? As even 2 to 5 years from now, those are the kind of things that keep me up at night. I'm like, wow, because if knowledge work is completely flipped on its head in the way that it is right now. And I don't think humans are going to be fully replaced, but it's definitely going to cut out a lot of bodies, I guess you could say, humans from the workplace. They're just not going, we're not going to need as many. What happens to our economy? For number one, I had a conversation, I think it was with Claude AI about this a while back, or maybe it was ChatGPT, can't remember, but it's like, hey, what happens if this should happen? And 50% of our workforce is displaced because we simply are just not needed in that capacity anymore. And there's not enough new jobs made to fill that gap. What happens to our economy? And, it talked about things like distributional or just, what do you call that? Where they distribute, everybody gets money. Like is that socialism? I don't know. I'm not very political. But
Yeah, I
basically
like the
people because
universal basic income kind of thing.
Yes. Universal basic income, something like that. They talked about like that would be really interesting. And then, don't even get me started on the risks and the dangers that could come of this and the race, the AI arms race, where a lot of companies aren't putting safety first. They might say they are, but are they really? I don't know. And so a lot of unknowns out there.
Yeah. It reminds me of this painting by Bruegel. Maybe it's called The Fall of Icarus, but it shows a farmer plowing his field and a pastoral landscape. And then very small in the background, you see Icarus falling from the sky, like with the wings of an angel that his dad made and splashing into the water. And the idea is like, just in the middle of ordinary everyday life, something incredible happened and most people are not even aware of it. That's what I feel like walking around outside. Like these people do not know what has hit us and what's going to hit us in a couple of years. But skills like authenticity, I think those are going to be even more valuable because those are irreplaceable. Authenticity, concern for others, creativity, and the ability to know how to use AI. So speaking of which,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. So you put a lot of study into how to use AI. I would love to hear what are some of the cleverest uses of AI that we may not be aware of.
Oh gosh, so I mainly use AI as, I would say, a CEO, as a marketing expert, as my spiritual guidance coach. That's all of these different ways. My study partner, my copywriter, my course creator, all of these things that you can use it with, but it's like, how do you get those kind of results from it, right? I use it as a research assistant, all these different things. And how do you do it in a way where you're not just wasting more time messing around with these models, not really getting a lot done? Because I'm going to be honest, in the beginning, I did that a lot, but I think there's a bit of that has to come with the learning
and it's also
curve.
become more powerful.
Playing with them. Definitely come a lot more powerful. So what I like to do personally, my kind of workflow is I use Claude as typically my favorite. I have a subscription to Claude, which is Anthropic, and ChatGPT. Anthropic, I really love their values. I think they're a lot more focused on safety first. And so I want to kind of support that. And this is the other thing. The more you learn about AI, the more you can have somewhat of a voice in how you use it for good instead of bad. And, just like everything else in life, we can choose to support the things that we're passionate about or that we care about. But ChatGPT works really well in certain use cases that Claude's not that great at. But in either case, they both kind of have this ability to where you can create, your own project or your own, basically like a mini trained model based on what you want it for. So for me and my practice, I use it in my own business, basically by, like, for example, I just took a scaling AI course through the Marketing AI Institute, which I have a lot of respect for that organization because they're not hype. It's all about business and really like enterprise AI adoption and what that looks like. And so I took everything from that course and I uploaded it into Claude as a project. And so that it now has all of the information that I do, and it can help me create content based on solving some of the problems that this course teaches on. So that's really how I develop a lot of my offers for, more like enterprise adoption. And then for the coaching model, the same thing. So basically any type of a business model that you have, you can give it as much context and information as you want inside these little kind of siloed project areas. So that way it remembers what you've talked about. It remembers all of that information there. And then when you go to work with it in a specific way, you get really good results that are tailored to what it already knows. And you're not reinventing the wheel every time you start a conversation. And you can do that as many times as you want. You can do it for clients. My clients love it, my personal one-on-one clients, because I do still work with a few people one-on-one. As long as you have your client's consent and you and your privacy policies and your confidentiality. Now, I'm not a therapist, so you probably have different rules to abide by than I have to. But in the end, people care about their confidentiality. And that's a lot of things that people don't quite understand about this either, as I'm sure you know, is they'll just upload anything into that. you have to be careful with that kind of thing. But you can upload things like Zoom transcripts and making sure that there's, first, last name, personal information there. And what you can do with that is really glean insights through patterns of the calls. It can really help you be a more efficient coach. At least for myself, it helps me be a lot more efficient, really maybe find things that maybe I even missed as I was talking to them. So there's just a few examples of how I use it. I could go on and on. There's so many, but yeah, it really blows my mind when I do talk to people about how much they're underusing it and really kind of use it more like a Google or something, which it just is not.
So when you upload the course materials, what is the prompt that you use so that it remembers what you're saying and applies it to future conversations?
So for example, when I did that one in Claude, you can label the project whatever you want. So I called it Scaling AI just because I knew that's where all my course materials would be. And I told it that I was going to build an offer around what I'm learning in this course to help small to mid-sized companies have AI adoption, because this isn't so much about teaching. It's a little bit like education is what companies need for sure, but it's more about how to empower a workforce, like a small to mid-sized company, how to empower them to adopt an AI forward kind of policies, governance, making sure their people get, training, education, AI literacy. And then how do we kind of decentralize it from the IT department and making sure that everybody can use this in a way that's going to help us be more innovative, help us be more efficient, and all those things. So I basically just tell it in the prompts because you can give it instructions and tell it kind of what I'm using it for. Like, you're going to help me. You're going to be a business mentor, advisor. Sometimes I might ask you to be my coach. One thing I found that I suggest everybody do that just immediately changed the information I got back from Claude in this case was I asked it to not be so agreeable with me all the time, because they do tend to do that. Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right. Well, maybe I'm not right. Maybe I'd like a different perspective. And so I asked it to, instead of just agreeing with everything I say, if you see an area, a perception that maybe I'm not viewing, a space where I could grow, I'd like you to push back on me and introduce that concept to me so that I can grow and not just have you, be my yes person that just says yes to everything. And immediately the responses got so much better.
What other little prompt hacks like that do you have? What are some of the cleverest prompts that you have?
There's another one that I've really been using a lot in Claude lately. And that is like, if you have a writing style that you like, you can upload a sample of that writing. So let's say, I'm sorry, Seth, but let's say Seth Godin, brilliant marketer. I love the way he writes. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's been around a very long time, but he's almost poetic in the way he writes. Anyway, so let's just say you have somebody like that, or somebody that you would, really love their writing style. You can upload that into Claude, and then you ask Claude to analyze that and describe that writing style. And then, so you have just kind of a description of that writing style. And you can do this as many times as you want with all kinds of different writing, but then you can go in there and you can upload. So if you're typing a prompt in Claude, it's going to show like different, right at the bottom. Sometimes it'll say it's set to concise because we're really busy right now. And so you can do this drop down arrow, and there's like concise answers, there's normal answers, there's exploratory answers, and give different, like, how do you want it to answer? And then you can upload these custom answers. So like reflection storyteller, that would be the Seth Godin one that I've got uploaded. If I want to kind of come across a little bit more in telling stories, then I can use this writing. So you can do that to where you can literally give it the same prompt and choose 3 different writing styles and choose the one that you feel like going with that day. Of course, you can do this with your own writing styles. So that's another really quick little easy thing that I find really helps with content creation, writing emails and things like that. Is it takes a few minutes to set up, but once you do, it's really handy to have those little things. I'm trying to think if there's any other like ones that just kind of blew my mind, like, wow, coding. Have you tried to mess around with coding at all with ChatGPT?
No. What would be the use case for that?
So for something like that, if you are designing, I don't know, a website, if you're creating a quiz, if you're like, what's so wild to me is I'm not a coder. I never learned to code. I don't understand the language. Obviously, I can't do really complex things with ChatGPT, whereas a coder could. They could, really code a lot faster. It's a huge game changer for people in that industry. But what you can do is you can create little snippets for things, which I do all the time. So if I'm working on my website landing page or something, and I'd really like this word to glow, I will say, ChatGPT, I'm working in Kajabi or I'm working in Go High Level, and here's the thing, I want it to do this. And it'll literally write me a code snippet that I can just go pop in there and boom, I have this little code. I create a little slideshow using code, and ChatGPT writes all of it. It's really good at writing code. And then the other thing I'm going to say, if nobody's heard of this one yet, that they could try is something called Replit.com, Replit.com. And what that is, talk about coding. It's fascinating and it's free to use. I think they started at where you get like 50 credits or something a month free. And if you use it a lot, you have to pay a little bit, but it's very inexpensive. And what this thing is you can go right in there and build an app. And you just tell it, like, I would like to build an app that, for example, I was just working on this one the other day, an AI adoption readiness assessment. So where companies can fill out the answers to these questions, be scored on their points, and then get a personalized recommendation from me based on where they're at in their business. So you could use this for lead magnets of any kind for your business. And it's fascinating because you just tell it to do that. And then it shows all the code going. And then eventually it comes up with the first prototype. You check it. Is there any changes? Does it work? It will say, would you like to add a PDF export? Or, it can just do all kinds of different things. Sorry about that. I thought this was on silent. There, we won't get dinged again. And so you can deploy it right there and house it through Replit. So you don't need to be a coder. Just about anybody can build an app. And that too is getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So already things that used to cost $100,000 to hire developers to build, somebody like you and me can just go to Replit and build it.
It's incredible. Why would you need an app as a lead magnet?
You don't need one, of course, but it was interesting to try this because there's so many different kinds of lead magnets. And I like an interactive lead magnet, something that's going to give somebody feedback after they give some information in. And so that's what I kind of really liked about this one, was that this was just one example that I created. I created another one for this little community that we're growing. And it was like, if you just sort of like a tracker, a goal tracker, and then you get badges, based on if you were consistent and you met these whatever metrics you set for yourself for your goals, and you met them, you get these little badges. But for a lead magnet, basically, I can just say, I have this assessment quiz for your business. You can take this and get your results sent to you. And you can collect their email from there. You can connect it to Stripe if you have something you actually wanted to charge for, if you built an app that, is a service that you're going to charge for. But I like it because it's just so original. It's just not something that we used to be able to do as a lead magnet.
Yeah, amazing. A couple prompts that I like are asking it, hey, what did I not ask that I should have asked?
Mm-hmm.
What else? Are there? Because one thing I like about that is it's pretty simple, and you can just tack it on the end of every prompt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there are other things like that where it's just like simple things that people just are not thinking about, but it can make a big difference.
100%. Yeah. A lot of it's just reiterating back and forth with it. I love that question that you asked. I think that's a really good one. It's kind of like we're almost coaching it, right? It's like, as we're asking open-ended questions, dig a little bit deeper, go into more layers with it, and you're going to get much better answers. Let's see. I had a couple notes here. Yeah. Here's one that I like, because also I'm worried about, because AI is trained on human data, it's like a really voracious reader, just read all the books in the world or all of the content in the world. And knowing how humans have bias, how we differ on our opinions, our morals, our values. AI, how do we make that not bias? How do we make it neutral? And of course, at this point, they haven't figured out how to totally do that yet. They're trying, but something that you can ask it. Let's see, what did I put? I like inclusion prompts too, which is sort of like, where did I have that? I can't remember exactly because I had it written down, because I don't use these all the time, so I don't remember, but it was something about like asking it what perspectives might be missing here, or whose voices might be underrepresented. And that will kind of like, I like the whose voices might be underrepresented, because that might help you open up to a different. So it's kind of like looking at a gemstone that's got all these different facets. And instead of just looking at the one side, you turn it and you look at it from the single and the single and the single. And so if we can ask questions that get it to give us a different angle, then that gives us a lot more material to work with, and we can choose what really lands for us or feels authentic for us.
Another really clever prompt that I learned from you is when asking it to produce some content, and you can ask, well, what are the criteria you used to produce this? And then rate each criteria from 0 to 10. And then the ones that have a lower one, you ask it, well, what would you need to do to bring that score up? So little ways of refining it.
Yeah, that's a great one too. It's about, always getting it to judge itself almost, right? So like getting it to be like, okay. And that's why I think that prompt that I did with Claude, when I said, don't disagree with me all the time, like push back if you see something else. So what it would do is it would say, like, I'd say something, it'd be like, yeah, that's good, but I'd like to just push back on you a little bit here and suggest this. And it wouldn't do that before. And so to me, I think just adding that instruction is very similar to just making it go deeper. It just took one step out of the equation. So it does that automatically now instead of me having to ask it to every time. But of course, there's still ways to go deeper and deeper into it. But yeah, as far as like the future, I think that you're going to see some really interesting changes. Like I think OpenAI is going to get very much more mainstream. Like I feel like it's mainstream now, and I think you do too because we've been around it. But then like I had lunch with an old colleague the other day because I'm kind of working on maybe helping, mid-sized companies incorporate this and adopt AI through the workforce. So I'm getting out to talk to people again that I haven't talked to since I was in the working world a few years ago. And I was mind blown. He works for a mid-sized company that makes, 50 to 100 million a year. It's not even on their radar. No, he doesn't even use it. Nobody there that he knows of uses it. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I feel like everybody knows about it. And then you get out and you talk to people in the world that's not in this world or the other part of the world that's not, focused on AI so much. And you realize that a lot of people just really aren't. So OpenAI, I think, just hired somebody for marketing. And you can also tell by these organizations in their hires, I think, like where things are going. And I noticed some commercials starting to come out on mainstream television now for OpenAI. And so it's going to start becoming much more mainstream as they start to, now that they feel like they got a handle on this and kind of a direction, they're going to really start to market it to the masses. Because right now it's really been mostly word of mouth, if you think about it. That there hasn't been any real marketing. It's Twitter or X that, a lot of platforms use, and podcasts now. So what is his name? Dario? I can't remember his last name. I'm terrible with names, but he's the one of the founders of Anthropic. He was just on the Lex Friedman podcast, and they did a 3-hour long interview along with the gal whose name I can't remember either. But she came on for the second half of the interview, and she's in charge of creating Anthropic's voice, so that the person that Claude's voice talks back to you. And it was a fascinating conversation. So I think that's another way that we can get a glimpse on where the future is heading, is rather than putting out big press releases or things like that, they're just going on podcasts and they're just talking as, really, at least Anthropic, I think, really transparently about what's going on behind the scenes and where they're headed and their concerns about the future, because they have concerns as well. Because if somebody gets their hands on this to do very bad things, that could end very badly. There was something, I don't know if you heard about this, but there was a study where I can't remember which model, I'd have to go back and get the details, but it had an agenda where the AI model had an agenda for itself, and it was manipulating the human using it to meet its own agenda. Now, that could be very, very dangerous. So it's things like that we really need to think about as a human race and where this is going.
Absolutely. And if history is any indicator, we're not going to think about it, and we'll ultimately get destroyed, at least in some way. Thankfully, we have God's grace. But this is also why I like Grok, because it's designed to be not as infected by what Elon calls the woke mind virus. I know it's not as advanced right now because it was developed a little later. Do you have any comments on Grok? That's from XAI.
You know what? I have not used it a lot. I'm not a paid X user. And I did see, though, that it's now free for everyone. So I'm looking forward to trying it out and seeing the differences, because that's the other fun thing with these models, is to give the same prompt, and see how different they are. And then you really I find myself anyway, leaning on one or the other that I use most because I like the prompts that it gives me, or I like the outputs that I get better. But Grok, I haven't really toyed with yet. I'm curious, do you have any feedback on it if you've gotten a chance to really dig into that one?
I've used it very little. I've been appreciated the length of the responses it gives. And it is trained to take more initiative in asking or in suggesting further prompts. So far I like it, but I'll
Oh,
continue getting more experience. So I want to share a
yeah.
crazy idea with you to hear
Okay.
your opinion on it. One of my missions, one of them that speaks most to my heart, is forming 1 million loving families. So that's the vision. It's actually
Forming,
forming
wait, say
10.
that again.
So helping form 1 million loving families.
Okay.
So I believe
Love it.
that the loving family is the best thing, the best human good on earth, and it solves so many problems in society. So what the challenges I think are, one, how do you identify out of so much parenting material out there, what is it that is going to have the highest impact? And
Hmm.
the second challenge is, once you've identified that, then how do you get the time to consume it? And then once you have the time to consume it, how do you then like remember it and make it a habit into your day-to-day life? So my intention is to address these challenges through my experience as a researcher and psychologist, identifying the research-based skills for effective parenting, and then giving parents a chance to practice those skills, implementing those skills using an AI interface, because then you have infinite practice and you can get different scenarios and it can grade you and you can see how you're doing and so forth. So, for example,
That's really
one way
cool.
to, the one skill is praise. There's helpful praise, there's unhelpful praise, and there's harmful praise, but believe it or not. So,
Okay.
the helpful praise is you praising the action and not the outcome. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So proud of you for studying for that test versus I'm so proud of you for getting an A.
Right.
So the way the AI comes into this is we explain like what the difference between the different praises are, and then the AI gives an example of praise, and then the parent responds, that was helpful, that was unhelpful, that was harmful. The app says that's right or wrong, and here's why. That's like level one.
Oh,
And once the parent gets a certain level of accuracy, like 90% accuracy, it goes to level two, where then it's the AI asks for an example of helpful praise and the parent responds. And then once that gets to 90% accuracy, then level three would be the AI gives an example of what a child could say, and then the parent responds with the helpful praise and so forth. So any comments on that or how to make this more effective?
I think that's brilliant. I love it. I really do. What a great use case. I had never even thought of that. And it sort of reminds me of almost like how you can use things like Duolingo, might not be the best example, but language models that are, teach you a foreign language and they kind of gamify it. So what you're doing is you're sort of taking this information into almost like gamifying it for a parent. Like once you get past this level, then you get the
Mhm.
harder questions and the harder questions and making it really accessible for them to lean into this. So I'm curious, so the way you described it is almost like it asks the questions, the parent answers, then it gets feedback based on their answers. And as they get better at, just in that one example, as they get better at learning how to praise in a way that's helpful, not harmful, then, they maybe learn a new concept or they go a different direction. I'm wondering, can you also, with something like that, could it evolve into something where you can bring real life scenarios to the table with it and ask it that, and then based on, how it's trained and all that knowledge, give you ways that you could possibly approach this in the most healthy, loving way possible or something like that. Like, being able to use your real life use cases that you can bring to the table, because I find that oftentimes that is when people really need the help. And same with coaching, slightly different lines of work we're in here, but often it's a crisis moment where they want that kind of feedback. And, they don't want to wait until next week when we actually have an appointment together or something. So I think that would be really cool too. But I love that idea. And you could definitely do something like that.
So the idea would be the parent would type in their crisis situation, and then
Mm-hmm.
the app would suggest, well, these are some ways you could have responded differently, and then help them to practice that.
Right. Or even they haven't even responded yet. Let's say they get some news while the child isn't at home and they know they're going to have a difficult conversation or something when the child does come home. But in either case, it's sort of like a real time, real world scenario that they could maybe get help at. It's like having, that parent support mentor person in your pocket at all times. That could be really powerful.
One reason why I thought this would be very helpful is when I work with parents, I share the the ideas of, hey, these are the skills that our research support that they're effective, and I teach them the skills. Then we check in next week, and they've like pretty much completely forgotten how to implement the skill, right? Which is totally understandable. I totally get it. And what they need, what we all need, is just the opportunity to practice it many times.
Yeah.
So that it just becomes a habit. They don't have to think twice about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that's the purpose. It's not just to have somebody to bail you out of every crisis situation. It's to learn to be able to just parent the most effective, loving way possible by practicing it all the time over and over again. I think that's really a beautiful use case. I can't wait to see you develop it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Well, any other thoughts for our audience on how their lives can get more value through the use of AI or think outside the box and using it?
Yeah, I would just say it's a wild time to be alive as a human on this planet, especially if you're my age. I'm 53, so I was around before the microwave, believe it or not, before cell phones. So I feel like I got, that childhood where we just played outside all day and then we really experienced everything. And now to be on the cusp of what is going to be completely changed the way we all live within 5 years, it will be completely changed. And to be a part of that, I think is something that's exciting. Also, who knows, a lot of uncertainty, but the world's uncertain. We don't know how long, our lives, we don't know if we'll be alive tomorrow, if we really think about it. So I try not to like catastrophize or anything, but just to be aware of it. And then I just say, we have this power in our hands right now. Go play with it. Go experiment with it. Like we've shared several different ways that you can use it for yourself to empower yourself to be more creative and more innovative. And don't think of it as replacing us, because that's not the way I envision it. And that's not what it's about. It's really about helping us to empower ourselves to be even better, like more personal growth, more innovation, more creativity, and all those things. So yeah.
It's a surreal time to be alive. Sometimes it feels like we're in a simulation. It's so unbelievable. Yeah. And we need virtuous leaders like you being on the forefront of these innovations so that to the extent that we can guide it towards the good. So keep up the good work, and thanks for chatting, G.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.